Okay. Middle. Yeah, people are still trickling in here. All right, so today we're gonna finish up the stuff on organizational change and development and organizational culture. So I'll just briefly review what I was talking about last time with org culture, and then we will move on into organizational change. And with any remaining time, I'll introduce HR. Uh, a lot of the parts of HR can be viewed as applications of organizational development or vice versa. So there's considerable overlap between the two subjects. And don't forget that your discussion board on 12 o'clock high, the final discussion board is due this evening. Yippee, no more after that. I gave you a lot of work this time, but I didn't give you a term paper. So, 4 or 5 extra discussion boards maybe compensate for the term paper, but at least how I do things. But in any case, it's over and you just have one more to go. I should be able to get the grades for the discussion boards like towards the end of not this week, but the following week. So we're getting near to the end of the semester. I'll give out the exam on the 7th, the 8th of May. So we're getting down to the wire. Let's get into a little bit. We'll review briefly the stuff I was talking about last time about organizational culture, corporate culture, and then I'll move into OD, organizational development, and then into, if there's any time left, the HR stuff, and we'll follow through with that next time. I'll also do a quick review next time. The best way to study for the exam is totally based on the book. I'm going to post it on in the Blackboard course documents section. I'll put it under like this current exam due or something like that. And you can just download it, fill it out. You could either type in your answers into the document and then re-upload it. It's just true, false, and multiple choice. So it's A, B, C, or D, or true or false. You can either type that in, or you could print out a page, use your pen, and then take a scan of the thing you wrote on. Whatever you want to do is fine. As long as I get a Word copy. If you upload any documents you upload need to be in Word. Please, no PDFs uploaded. I can't write on PDFs, so they're useless. I need a Word format. Whatever you upload, whatever you scan or upload should be in Word format. I appreciate that. Okay, so just going back over organizational culture. Are there any questions, by the way, about the housekeeping administrative stuff that I'm talking about? Nothing? Okay. If you have something, let me know. Organizational culture. You might call it collective mental programming. I always like that definition. Or your book says it's a system of shared meaning held by an organization's members that distinguish the organization, and it's characterized by values, beliefs, and assumptions. manifested in symbols, and they form the foundation for shared meaning. So a big part of a culture is that it gives people a way to share meaning. Um, we talked about the four kinds of competing values that characterize cultures: clan, autocracy, market, and hierarchy. I talked about a few ways to measure culture. Uh, I talked about the difference between a dominant culture that expresses the core values and a subculture that differentiates different units, such as departments. Cultures distinguish organizations. They create a sense of identity. They facilitate commitment. They stabilize the social system. It's a kind of social glue. One of the big assets of it, and I talked a little bit about Ochi's three kinds of organizational forms: market, bureaucracy, and clan. And I said that there were three control systems associated with one each with the types. One is with market, contract; with bureaucracy, rules; and with clan, organizational culture. And I hope I made it clear that culture offers a highly flexible method of control. So if you can indoctrinate your employees to believe certain things, you can rely on them to behave in certain ways. And this is very good for an organization, because what they need is predictability. Often they need employees who are going to do the things they want. So if everyone's in agreement on how things should be done, you don't need to use supervision. Okay, that's the difference between bureaucracy and plan. That, if you have rules, you need a supervisor. If everyone has adopted the rules and believes in them, you don't need a supervisor. You can count on them. They're their own supervisor. So basically, culture is a way to make companies a lot more efficient. And if you look at the warfare of the 19th century, what happened was that it started in the early 19th century, that mostly the countries were run by emperors and kings. You had Kaiser Wilhelm and Tsar Nicholas and so on. And Napoleon was the first outcome, like the first sort of stable outcome of the French Revolution. He was certainly a perversion of what they had hoped for, and it kind of shows that radicalism. He's like the first case where a lot of people got murdered in the name of radical change, horrific bloodshed, and then the outcome was just an ugly dictatorship that waged war. And so this idea that radical change is productive is kind of like been falsified from day one. The first example of it being the French Revolution was a complete failure. But in any case, Napoleon was able to muster much greater loyalty from his army, because it was an army of the people. It was an army of France. Whereas the armies of Germany and Italy and the other countries that France defeated were armies that were recruited by an emperor or by a king, and they didn't feel that level of commitment to the emperor or the king. An Italian fighting for the Habsburgs, say, wouldn't feel the kind of loyalty. Now, that conservative monarchical system was reinstated by the Council of Vienna, but then in World War I, it was completely destroyed. that the sense of commitment that people felt to a republic was far more powerful than the sense of commitment they felt to some distant monarch. And the result was that the Republican system replaced the system of empires in Turkey and in Europe. In Russia, you had the Russian Revolution, which is a whole other story. And so basically all of the monarchs and emperors were displaced. The outcomes were not necessarily pleasant, but the reason they were displaced was that the culture of the military was facilitated, and the level of commitment, I should say, was facilitated by the Republican form, by the feeling that this is our government, it's the government of the people, not of a distant monarch. And so can companies create that same kind of mentality, that the employees are highly committed to the organization, the way the Marines are to the Marines, out of patriotism, if you will. And this is kind of the aim of organizational culture. So basically, we talked a little bit about ethical cultures. And basically, ethical cultures are the shared concept of right or wrong behavior, and basically ways to encourage ethical cultures are for leaders to have to be visible role models, for them to communicate ethical expectations, to provide ethical training, to reward ethical acts and punish unethical ones, to provide protective mechanisms for people who protest. And basically, you can say that the values of top managers are good predictors of behavior among the rank and file. If a manager is ethical, the rank and file will be ethical. And we saw with Enron, the reverse is also true, that if you have psychopaths at the top, that will be communicated to everybody else. And, you know, the case of the utility regulation in California, those guys were directly reflecting this psyches of Ken Lay and even more so Jeff Skilling, and this kind of cynical lack of concern for legality or lack of concern for society. Okay, so basically cultures can be weak or strong. And in a strong culture, values are intensely felt. In a weak one, they're not. One of the advantages of a strong culture is that the employees are going to be highly committed. I think I mentioned that Charles O'Reilly had done work with the Amana cult, and that Peters and Waterman in their bestseller In Search of Excellence talk about the companies being like cults, that employees who are fanatical about their organizations are going to do things that ordinary employees won't do. And that's why such companies can outcompete more bureaucratic or business-like companies. It's the same thing with the French army versus the Italian army. An army that's, you know, fighting on behalf of a distant monarch is not going to be fanatical, is not going to make sacrifices. An army that's fighting on behalf of their own dictator, you know, that feels that they are fighting for France, is going to be far more powerful. So basically, the organizational climate is related to ethics, and basically the shared perceptions that members have about their organizations can be positive or negative. positive cultures build on employees' strengths. They reward more than they punish. They encourage vitality and innovation. Uh, Not all cultures are. One example is the automobile companies in Detroit in the 1970s. That they had negative labor relations going back to the 1930s when there were sit-down strikes and other labor protests in the big American car companies. So they were successful in the 1950s and 60s, but they had never mastered positive employee relationships, and they continued this hostility, I mean, into the 2000s. And basically that led to their detriment. Now, the biggest car companies are no longer General Motors and Ford. I think General Motors is seventh. The biggest is Toyota, and second is Volkswagen, and the other ones are all foreign, not non-US. When I say foreign, non-US car companies. And basically, Detroit was unable to compete when the Japanese firms invaded, if you will, in the 1970s because they had better quality. And the reason they had better quality was the stability of the labor relations and the introduction of total quality management, which if we have time, I'll tell you a little bit about. So basically, strong cultures that have a positive climate can induce employees to play an important role in actualizing and achieving cooperation. A problem, though, with very strong cultures is that the employees and the management and the company as a whole can be immune to new thinking and may resist innovation. So basically, cultures can be encouraged to be more open to change. And if you have a company, you need to think about how to create a culture that not only tolerates change, but encourages change and thrives on change. Okay, so how do you do that? How do you create innovative cultures? And part of that comes from the organizational structure that we talked about last time. That organic organizations being ones that are flexible, that use cross-hierarchical relations, that aren't tied to the formal organization, that use cross-functional teams, that have few rules, that don't have strict chains of command and bureaucratic requirements and supervisors who are Budinskis, if you will, and micromanaging the employees, that possess a comprehensive information network and rely on participative decision making. All of these attributes will encourage more innovative cultures. I think if you have leadership that encourages comfort with change, that'll help. About 20 years ago, there was this book that a lot of the managements were giving out because companies were confronting the change with the innovation of the internet and so on. And the book was Who Moved My Cheese? It was a stupid little book about this mouse who always expects the cheese to be in one place and suddenly it's elsewhere, and they have to confront the change and so on. It's like a ridiculous thing. But the thing is, I think managements need to do a better job than that of creating cultures that are innovative, that not only don't mind change, but that encourage it, that thrive on change. And basically, some of the ways to do this involve not just organizational structure, but also HR practices such as contingent rewards, In other words, using incentives. And this again contradicts the claim of Alfie Kohn in Punished by Rewards and other opponents of using financial rewards, Decky, that who claim that rewards demotivate. But what the research finds is that contingent rewards create an atmosphere that's friendly to new thinking. So in other words, if you create a new idea and you're rewarded for it, there's going to be more openness to innovation. Slack resources nurture innovation. So basically, the example I like to use, I use in the other class too, is Jackson Pollock, the famous abstract artist who Peggy Guggenheim, the heiress, took under her wing and bought him, subsidized him, bought him a house and subsidized him. And he was free to create on his own. He had this slack resources. And if you're going to be creative, you need the time to be creative. If you're busy doing routine work all the time, you will never be creative. So to be innovative, you need to have one of the things 3M does, 3M, the manufacturers of Scotch tape and Post-its, one of the things they do is give their employees downtime so that they're able to experiment. They get several hours a week where they have their own experimental processes going on. I'm talking about, they don't do this for the, clerks and the accounts payable office. They do it for the, the engineers that design products. So they give them downtime and say, go ahead, innovate. And that's where a lot of their ideas. The most famous one was, of course, Post-its, who the innovator of that, Spence Silver, is like a sort of a hero and part of their culture. In other words, the people that play a big role in moving the company forward become legends within the company. And this is part of how organizational cultures perpetuate themselves. And they talk about this hero or that hero. In the case of the nuclear navy, the founder, Admiral Hyman Rickover, is still legendary in that organization. They still talk about him. There's a little section in your case on the Smile Factory, on the Disney organization and the Disneyland culture, where they mention that the supervisors sometimes say, Walt is looking at you from the sky. And this is the kind of metaphor that cultures adopt to perpetuate themselves. They tell stories of their successes and heroism. Of course, if you try to destroy that, you say, oh, well, the American heroes are evil and so on and so forth. Then, of course, the reason you would do that is to destroy the society. If your aim is to destroy society, the best way to do it is to destroy the culture. And so basically, what companies need to do is to try to build their cultures and create these mythological elements that people believe in and repeat. Okay, now, as I say, one of the issues with strong cultures is that if a lot of people strongly believe in the processes and the values of the company, then they're likely to resist change. And the same thing is going to be true of national culture norms. So countries that are highly tradition oriented are going to be less innovative. I may have mentioned already the writer David Reisman, who's actually was a sociologist, and much of his research was done in the area of universities. He studied universities, but his most famous book he wrote very early in his career when he was very young, and it was called The Lonely Crowd in the 1950s. And what Reisman said, I think he spells it with two N's, David Reisman, have to check that. And basically, what he says in there is that American society went through three phases: tradition directed, um, inner directed, inner directed, and other directed. Ugh, it didn't work too well, but anyway, other directed. So the idea of tradition directed is like an ancient tribe or a medieval culture where there's a lot of weight put on tradition. In medieval Europe, the great chain of being, that the aristocracy comes, the king, the royalty comes first, and then the aristocracy, and then the landed gentry, and so on. And the church fits in at the top, and so on. And basically, this very hierarchical model characteristic of medieval cultures is highly tradition oriented. The British still have it to a degree. They still have the monarchy. I've spoken to people who taught at Oxford, and they told me that there's all kinds of traditions. They wear the uniforms and stuff like that. So this idea of tradition directed is that people follow the traditions, or the tribe follows the tradition. And that was changed in response to Lockean liberalism. I don't think he talks about that, but that there was a adoption of a belief in oneself, individualism, that you can, this was characteristic of 19th century America, that people are relying on yourself. None of these have gone away. There are still plenty of tradition-oriented people, and there's still plenty of inner-directed oriented people. And then you could argue that the third kind is dominant in the cities, other directed, that people copy each other. They copy their organizations. They get their values from the newspaper or from a TV show. So you get all these people who are like, they see something on TV and they start screaming about it, Trump this or Biden this, or blah blah blah, and they base it all on the media, and they copy each other, and they see fashions. Like where I live part-time in the city, we're here a few days a week, and I'm in Lower Manhattan, where there are a lot of college students around here, a bunch of college, you know which one's NYU. St. John's University now has a campus here, Cooper Union. I think there are a couple other ones. And basically a lot come in the evening to go to bars and all kinds of stuff like that. And there are certain places that really catch on. Like there's this bakery a few blocks from me, the Lafayette Bakery on Lafayette Street on Bond, I think. And there's always a line around the block outside that place. It's like amazing. It's like the line just goes, it's like an hour wait to get in there. And one time I went by there, and my wife and I were, we were looking for something to do, and it was somewhat empty. And so we didn't have to wait online. So we went in, and I said, it's good, it's good stuff, but there, in the area, there's dozens of good places. Why that particular one catches on is a kind of a sociological thing. And basically, marketing people want to know this. This is like a lot of what marketing is, like how do you get people to think that way about your company. But basically this kind of copying each other is other directed. That's the idea, that you don't have any fixed values, but you learn from the fashion. That fashion is an example of it, by the way. So what Reisman said is that the culture moved from tradition directed to inner directed to other directed. And I would say at this point in history, there's been a further revolution. No, I haven't read about this anywhere that people say this, but I mean, you saw with the social media that we're now technological, the social dilemma. I mean, that we're now technological. Maybe I mentioned this at the time, technologically directed. And people no longer look to each other, but they look to technology to shape them. So basically, I think this coping with change and being able to adopt technological change, because we live in an era of technological focus. I think part of it is that the technology is efficient, but I really don't think that the technology that's been adopted by the tech industry, that's been sold by Microsoft and, I'm talking about Google and Apple and all that, the laptops and the internet and the cell phone. If you look at American productivity rates of change, they have not increased since the advent of the PC, and they have not increased since the advent of the smartphone. So these technological innovations have not radically, in fact, the rate of technological improvement is slower. I'm sorry, when I say technological improvement, I meant to say the rate of productivity gain, the rate of objective productivity gain has been slower since 2000 than it was before 1950. So basically, this technology, I don't think its main attribute is really productivity gain, because we don't see it. The economy is not more productive now. What you see, though, is focus on the technology. More and more people are obsessed with the technology, and you see it used in a lot of ways that really don't improve productivity. One example is like you go to restaurants now. They seem to have pulled back on it, but for a while, like in the last couple of years, and instead of having a menu, you need to use a smartphone. So you have to have a smartphone just to go there. And then rather than hand you a menu, you have to take out your smartphone, you have to turn it on, you have to press the camera, you have to just get the camera in the right place. Then the menu is on the small smartphone, which is hard, at least for an old guy like me, to read. And then you have to fool around with the menu to get it. So basically, they didn't make anything simpler. If anything, they made it more difficult. And yet they all want to do it. Okay, so I think what I'm trying to say is, and I know this is a somewhat idiosyncratic point, many of you may disagree, that the technology has become an end in itself. It's become a fixation, and increasingly our norms are tailored to the goals of the tech companies and not the other way around. But in any case, whether that's true or not, I think it's triply true that you need to deal with change management, and you need to think about, how can I be good at change, and not just be good at it, but thrive on it and encourage it and develop it. Because I think the world is going to be subject to increasing change, to increasing rates and processes of change. And, most people don't like change. Change can be defined as when things become different from the way that they were. Okay. And we don't always like that. When you're young, you don't mind. As you get older, it's not supposed to be this way. It's supposed to be the way it was when I was young. Okay. I was watching a Twilight Zone episode the other day, starring Dean Jagger, who's the Major Stovall in 12 O'Clock High. And it's about this guy in 1961, and he's upset that everyone is watching TV, and he can't. He's lost his youth, and everyone's watching TV, and he hates TV, and he wants to go back to listening to the radio, which was what they did when he was young. And so he gets this radio and he turns it on, and he magically hears all the broadcasts from the 1930s that go back 25 or 30 years, and he's transported to the old time. And I think that's a normal reaction to change. I think Rod Serling, the part of the reason I watch the Twilight Zone isn't just that it's from my time, is an example of what I'm talking about, but it's also like incredible literature. And Serling was a genius, and I think he captures in that something that's eternal. That when we live in this capitalist, changing, progressive world, we are going to live with a lot of change. If we hate change, we will reinstate feudalism. We will reinstate, that's what communism was basically. You reinstate a rigid society where you have a central plan and things don't change a lot. But basically, I think the reason people like that, and when I talk to my wife, who spent half her life in Germany, and a lot of that in East Germany, when she talks to her friends in East Germany, a lot of them complain that, oh, we should go back to communism. We can't deal with this. It's terrible. Everyone had a job back then. Everything's uncertain. But the thing is, the standard of living was 1/3 the standard of living in our world. And so you can live in a primitive way that's highly stable and not see advancement, or you can live in a way that's constantly changing and see advancement, but you can't have both. Having them both together is asking for a square circle. There are a lot of reasons for that, and I'm about to tell you what they are. In any organization, whether it's a government or a corporation, change is threatening. Habits, security, need for security, as well as security itself, economic fears, fear of losing your job, which is not unrealistic. For one example that you can take off the top of your head is the printers. In the 1950s, printing was a major occupation. It was one of the highest paid crafts. They had a wonderful union, the National Typographical Union. They earned great wages. They were the elite of the blue collar world. They earned great wages. They were well educated. Many of them knew the texts of the classic books better than academics. It was truly a wonderful field. With the invention of the PC in the 1980s, a computer could do everything they do basically for zero cost. So that entire wonderful profession, and I honor it, was made redundant, and it's a tragedy for them, and it's sad that people lost their jobs. But the simple truth is that if you can do something for $1 or $30 that you used to have to spend $32,000 on, you can't sustain the old way. And that's why innovation is so important, despite the costs of these wonderful printers losing their careers and losing their jobs and seeing this way of life disappearing. They had an incredible union that was written about by these guys, Lipset, Trow, and Coleman, in this book, Union Democracy. It was a case study of their union. It was truly wonderful craft, and it just totally disappeared. And this is sad, but the result of that is that people are richer and so have more money to spend on everything else. And the result is an improvement in the standard of living, despite the tragic loss of a single craft. So basically, change is typically and almost universally viewed as threatening. And basically threats to expertise, structural inertia, threats to establish power. And last time I think I talked about Pfeffer and Solanchik and the idea that in corporations, power accrues to the people, the divisions that generate the most wealth. And if that changes, then who has the most power needs to change. But those who possess power resist the change. Now let's magnify that to the government level. And you see that government agencies will never disappear once they're established. There was a study that I read that something like 2%. The failure rate among businesses is virtually 100%. So basically, you're never going to voluntarily close your company because change is the right path. You're always going to try to preserve your power. And what Pfeffer and Solanchik pointed out is that management interests that are able to cope with change and shift the power structure of the company are going to have companies that last for longer times. Whereas management interests that insist on retaining the status quo will be subject to decline in bankruptcy. And that is precisely why I think we looked up last time, it was either this class or the other class, that 12% of the Fortune 500 from the 1950s is still with us. 12%, that's 60 of 500. The others are all gone because they weren't able to anticipate the change on which all companies must thrive in order to be successful. Okay, so the question is, the big question with change management has to do with how do you overcome resistance to change? That's a very important question. And a few of the steps that your book talks about on page 542 and 3 are a few of the ways are communication, participation, building support and commitment, commitment to the organization, developing positive relationships and trust, and selecting people whose personalities accept change. One of the models of change management that has been in vogue in companies for a long time, let me get that screen thing. Where is that? Screen sharing, where'd that go? Oh, if I can't find it, now I can't find it. Strange. Where'd it go? All right, maybe it's down here. Oh, here it is. Share screen. So one of the theories or models of change management that's been in vogue for a long time is Kurt Lewin's theory that you unfreeze the status quo, moved to a desired end state, and then refreeze the new change. Driving forces which direct behavior away from the status quo can be increased. Restraining ones which hinder movement away from the status quo can be reduced. And you can combine the two approaches. So it's kind of like you have a force field of the present, and so you have a force field and there are forces for change and forces opposed to change. And the goal of the management is to weaken these and strengthen these. So you push back the opposition, you push back the resistance, and you increase the susceptibility to change. Cotter amplified this. He developed an 8-step plan that, and you could apply this when your discussion board due tonight on 12 o'clock high, you could apply this and analyze to what degree did Savage apply Cotter's model to revising the 9/18 culture. And Cotter's 8-step plan is that you establish a sense of urgency by creating a compelling reason for change. You form a coalition with enough power to implement the change. You create a new vision to direct the change. And I think on that he fell down a little. You communicate the vision. Maybe he was okay with creating the vision that he gets from Pritchard, but he fails to communicate the vision well. He talks to Bishop, and he basically just in that one conversation with Bishop, really, when Bishop says he can't understand the point of it all, and then he gives Bishop the picture, a solid overcast of American bombers hitting the Third Reich where it lives, and this vision is what was needed in the first place. This is what we're building. We are creating. It's like an entrepreneur. They're building the Air Force. They're creating a whole new institution. And it's an institution that's necessary to preserve freedom. And he didn't communicate that. And so I think he fell down a little because of that. But when he tells Bishop then brings it back to everybody else, and they vote in his favor. And the next steps are empowering others to act on the vision, and you encourage risk-taking and problem solving. And then you plan for, create, and reward short-term wins. And one of the ways that you encourage people to become empowered is through a win-win philosophy. That sorry, not a win-win. I meant to say a small wins, win-win too, but I meant to say small wins philosophy, where you acknowledge every gain is acknowledged, and you encourage incremental advancement. And that's really how people learn. You learn to ride a bicycle a little bit at a time until you get the balance. Same thing with learning to drive a car. You start out a little bit, and then you get more confidence and you learn. So you reward short-term wins, you consolidate improvements, you reassess changes and make necessary adjustments, and you reinforce the changes by demonstrating the relationship between the new behaviors and organizational success. One thing that might be helpful, and I would apply this to HR as well as to OD, or change management, which is, and OD stands for, incidentally, organizational development. And this idea is action research. And action research kind of parallels the scientific method, where you have a theory and then you test the theory using an experiment to see whether the experiment confirms or denies the theory. So you develop a theory through based on your past knowledge and what's been learned in the past. You develop a hypothesis, and then you test the hypothesis using methods that are available. Sometimes they have to be creative ones, but often, for instance, when the astronomers wanted to tell, I think this has changed with the new telescopes, but when they, in the past, when they wanted to tell whether there was a planet, they couldn't see the planets because they don't emit light, but what they could see was whether the stars were stretching out slightly, and the stretching out slightly would indicate the existence of a planet. Since then, they've improved the telescopes, and I think at this point they've identified many planets, and so the nature of science is merging into science fiction, if you will. You know what I'm saying? That, we're seeing that other worlds are possible at this point. So basically, action research parallels the scientific method, and you use the question that, does what we try work? And this is very important. It's not done nearly enough. When I talk about HR next time, and maybe the time after, I will discuss that one of the big faults of HR is that it does not use any kind of validation. I'm not saying they don't know about it. People who teach HR and study it as academics and consultants know full well about HR. It's ingrained about HR, about validation. It's ingrained in the case law about discrimination. Validation is a legal concept as well as a psychological one. And the companies are obligated to do it, but they don't. Most companies don't validate their selection methods. Some do, but most don't. And they don't evaluate their training programs to the extent that they should. So basically, the steps to action research are diagnosis, analysis, feedback, action, and evaluation. The people who participate in the change program need to identify the problem and determine the solution. The consultant, the OD consultant, can't know how to solve the business problems of somebody else. The people working with the problem know the solution already. They're just unable to bring it to the fore. They're unable to actualize it. The next step after you identify the problem is to get feedback and share with the employees what they've developed, what the solution is, apparently, based on their ideas. The consultant then carries out the specific actions or gets management to do so. And then the method is to evaluate and test whether the change has been affected using objective methods. Action research takes the evidence about the solution to the problem and lowers the resistance to the change by showing that the change worked. Okay, so if you want to get people to change, one good way is to get an example of change and show that the change was effective, and then get them to copy it. One of the reasons that Europe was willing to adopt the Republican forms of government after World War I was that they had the example of the United States, and Woodrow Wilson went to Europe and advocated the adoption of the Republican form of government. If there had been no example of the United States being able to function in this way, the European countries would have been less likely to adopt the Republican form of government. At that time, they had empires. Okay, so the empires had all destroyed themselves during World War I, but that's a subject for another class. So basically, organizational development is the idea of collecting or making changes based on planned change interventions built on humanistic democratic values that seek to improve organizational effectiveness. Process consultation is a meeting in which a consultant assists a client in understanding process events in which they must deal and identify processes that need improvement. Common topics for OD include workflow, informal relationships, and formal communication channels. The assumption is we can improve organizational effectiveness by dealing with interpersonal problems through participation and involvement. And basically, the idea of OD is that joint diagnosis, concerning processes, improving interpersonal relations, concerning communication channels, conserving efficiency, that all of these kinds of changes can be solved through joint diagnosis, where the client basically solves their own problems with the guidance of an OD consultant. The idea of intergroup development is one where the OD consultant talks to different groups and then gets them to think about changing their attitudes towards the other groups and themselves and eliminating stereotypes. For example, if there are two departments that hate each other. So basically, intergroup development seeks to change groups' attitudes, stereotypes, and perceptions. Another approach, appreciative inquiry, seeks to identify unique qualities and special strengths of an organization, which can be built on to improve performance. And one last point about organizational change and organizational development is the change paradox, the theory that the key paradox in management is that there is no final optimal status for an organization. Holistic thinking and balanced paradoxical elements are effective. In other words, change is continuous, change is eternal, and improvement is eternal. And this idea comes from total quality management. And the idea of total quality management, which was first discussed by W. Edwards Deming and others. There were plenty of other guys talking about it, Crosby and others, is that you have a production process and you can identify the process with some target output. You know, this line represents the target. For example, Taguchi, a statistician who formulated statistical formulas based on Deming's ideas, argued that let's say you have a size 6 shoe and you have a process that's producing shoes, and somebody, you look at the outputs and let me change this to the let's see if this works. So yeah, this one works better. So you have a process and it's producing outputs that look like that. And you know, this might be a 50th of an inch. So this is, let's say in the first month, the shoes are a 49th, you know, if let's say these two outer lines are the 50th of an inch difference. So in the early part of the process, it's slightly less than this optimal size 6, and in the later part of in the second month, say, it's greater than the optimal size 6. And somebody comes and takes a look at this and says, wait a second, why is this happening? And Deming said that the causes of such a systematic change are called the special causes of variation. And the more systematic sources of change that I'll mention in a second are called the systematic causes. Okay, now what would cause the special causes? I just spoke a little coffee or something. What would cause the special causes? Well, there are many reasons. For example, a machine might be malfunctioning, or you might be using different inputs. For example, you may be getting raw materials from two different suppliers. Both suppliers are good. You went with the low cost bidder. Both are good, but they're slightly different. You can have two good suppliers that provide slightly different inputs. So the idea that the low cost bidder is the best system is not true, according to Deming, that you don't want to go with the low cost bidder. You want to go with a single source. And the reason is that that systematizes the inputs. So basically, what management's goal is, according to Deming, is to eliminate these special causes of variation. All right, now I'm going to double draw this. Now, let's say they've since then, okay, so this is the size 6, the middle one. And let's say they've identified the special causes and have eliminated them. So there's randomness within the acceptable range. There's random, I'm not getting these circles well, but the idea is that they're all within the acceptable range. But then there's a couple that fall outside the range. And that's, in statistics, that might be called an outlier. I haven't taken attendance yet. Huh. Brendan says he likes the Twilight Zone. I think the Twilight Zone is excellent. I don't think there's really been a science fiction show ever that equals it. It's not so much if you can deal with the black and white. I know a lot of you guys can't, but the plot lines are like Rod Serling's imagination was almost unlimited. Even the mediocre ones are like better than most TV shows you see. They're just amazing. The plot and the best ones are astonishing. You never forget them. So anyway, what you do, getting back to this, is you tell the employees that when these occurrences occur, when these outliers occur, you empower the employees to turn off the production process and investigate why the outlier occurred, and then eliminate the systemic cause of variation. So this might be things like a malfunctioning of a machine, a wearing out of a machine, things like that. Excuse me. So basically, the employees have to be empowered. And for TQM to actually work, you need to have highly committed employees who are there for a long time, who know so much about the production process that they can correct the outliers. So the end result is what Deming called continuous improvement, or that maybe he didn't coin those words, but that's the idea, that you have Kaizen, or continuous improvement. And what that does is it reduces that over time, the limits of acceptability get narrower and narrower. And so there's less and less variation. And things that were acceptable in the beginning become unacceptable. And so, why does this have such a big effect? The reason is that when units fit together well, they don't wear out. So, as a result, the cars fit together much better because they're all the components perfectly fit. Now, if you buy stuff that you have to put together, you know that a lot of the stuff made in America now is of low quality. And I'm sorry to say that Deming's ideas did not become dominant. What happened was that the advent of technology made flexibility and innovation easier paths to follow than the emphasis on quality. And the result is that we get a lot of new products, but they're generally of low quality. Okay. That said, I will take attendance. We only have 7 minutes left. Those of you who came a little late, the discussion board on 12 o'clock high is due tonight. Part of the reason I saved it toward the end is that change management stuff is directly related. Corporate culture is directly related. Organizational structure is directly related, as well as things like personality, team building, workplace conflict, power and politics. They all play a role in the film. So take another look and answer the discussion board questions as your final discussion board. I will now, okay, we're just about done. So I will now take attendance. Okay. Let me get the attendance sheet. Farhad Abdul.
I'm here.
Hello, Farhad. Ahmed Alkor.
I'm here.
Hello, Ahmed. Mohammed Afi. Mohammed. Jenna Bell.
Here, Professor.
Oh, you're here? Okay. Gotcha. Jenna Bell.
Here.
Joseph Catanzaro.
I'm here, Professor. Can we leave once attendance is taken?
What?
Can we leave once attendance is taken or no?
Yeah, okay. We'll end with this, yes.
Okay.
Jiamin Chen.
I'm here.
Hello. Janine Cola. Janine. Kermia Cyrus.
I'm here.
Hello. David Estorovsky.
Yeah, I'm here, Professor.
Okay. Marimar Garcia.
Here.
Okay. Monica. Alexia.
Here.
Hello. Keeney. Jiang.
Here.
Hello. Yusuf.
I'm here, Professor.
Hello, sir. Georgie Karimlashvili.
Here.
Hello, sir.
Hi.
Summer. Summer Lamb. Hong Jian Lin.
Here.
Hello. Hamdi Molly.
Here.
Hello. Ludley. Ludley Noel. Farhida.
I'm here.
Okay, Ludley.
Hello? Okay.
Gotcha. Ludley, right? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Famida Petwari.
Hi, Professor. I'm here.
Hello. Hello. Emmanuel Plamakis.
I'm here.
Okay, Emmanuel. Raquel Porteous. Raquel.
I'm here.
Hey, Raquel. Jishan Ruan. Jishan. Brendan, Samuel.
Here, Professor.
Hi,
Morning.
Brandon. Aaliyah Todd.
I'm here for.
Hello, Leah. Stacy.
I'm here. Good morning.
Good morning. Denasia. Denasia Warner. Jack Wu.
Here, Professor.
Hello, Jack. Yayin.
I'm here, Professor.
Hello. Matthew.
Here.
Hello.
Denasia Warner. I'm here.
Okay. Matthew Zhao.
Yes, I was here.
Taryn Sander. Christian Mendez. Janaya Pratt.
I'm here, Professor. Sorry, I'm here.
This was Chris. Okay.
This is Christian Mendez. Yeah, sorry, there's some issues with
No
the
problem.
mute button.
Don't worry about it. Christian, I have Taryn Sander. Janaya Pratt.
Here.
Hello. Alex Sander. Betts. Alexander. Jack Shrem.
Here.
Hello. Okay, I'm going to call off the name of the people that did not answer. If you're here, please let me know. Janine Cola, Monica Garcia, Summer Lamb, Summer, Jishan Ruan, Taryn Sander, and Alex Betts. Are any of those folks here? Okay.
Call my name.
Zhixuan Zhang, hold on. Oh, I think I had you marked present. Sorry, but I had you marked present.
Thank you.
Is Yin here? Yin Zhang?
I'm here.
Okay, that's what happened. I put it on the wrong line. Okay, so I still don't have, the ones I still don't have, Taryn Sander, Jishan Ruan, Alexia Harrigan, those three. Any of them here? Okay, we're out of time. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. Otherwise, I see Alex's name here. I don't know. Otherwise, have a nice day, have a nice weekend, and I'll see you on Monday. Don't forget the discussion board. Alexander, you're here? No? All right. Raquel, question? Okay, have a nice day. I will see you guys